clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Peck,
Here.
Commissioner Angel,
Here.
Commissioner Arpke,
Here.
Commissioner Jennings, Commissioner Larson.
Here.
Would you please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence?
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This time I'd like to open the meeting up for the Citizens Open Forum. This is a time that anyone can come up and discuss something that is not on today's agenda if they so choose.
I so choose. Mayor Peck, Commissioners, I'm Kay Crawford, 845 Manchester. Most of you remember me from having worked here at the city for a number of years. But for those of you who don't, I think Commissioner Arpke is new since I retired. I'm not really sure. I don't remember that too well, but I directed human relations for a number of years and worked for the city for 24, and I retired a year and a half ago. Those years, though, dim in comparison to the 38 years that my grandfather, Sam Hammond, and his wife worked as sexton of Gypsum Hill Cemetery. I have a great interest in Gypsum Hill Cemetery. I bring this to you only to let you know the history that I have, not only with the city of Salina, but also with the cemetery. I learned to ride my bicycle at Gypsum Hill Cemetery. Many nights while being babysat by them, I saw my grandfather dictate to my grandmother, and they kept in big books entries and information about funerals that they'd had that day. He could not write very well, but my grandmother could. When they interviewed my grandfather after 38 years with the city, he said it took 4 hours sometimes to dig a grave, and much, much longer when they were getting ready for a funeral, and sometimes they had to work nights when there was snow and ice in the wintertime. They cut grass with power mowers, but they walked behind the mower. So thankfully, we've come a long way since those years of hard work. We have riding mowers now and weed eaters and so forth. You ask why this is relevant. It's relevant to me. And it's relevant because it's budget time. So I'm here to tell you, and I cannot remember, I've talked this over with Steve a number of times, but I can't remember the supervisor's name at the cemetery. But they do a wonderful job. And it's very important that you know that, because I think you see the people here at City Hall, and you see the people on the streets, and that's very hard work also. But maybe you don't see the people at the cemetery. So when you retire, you see things like that. They just recently completed cutting around every stone, so it looks just beautiful. And it's extremely hard work. They wear masks over their faces, they wear boots, they wear long, I'm not telling you anything you probably don't know. It's a reminder. I would say please do not cut, as you're looking at the budget, please do not cut the cemetery. Not that I've heard anything that you are, but just remember that they have, I think, 2 or 3 workers now. At the time my grandfather was there, they had 2 or 3 workers. But they have a lot more lots now than they did then, a lot more acreage to cover. The cemetery was kind of my second growing up place, and I go up there every day, 5 days out of 7, walk my dog early in the mornings. Thank you for the poop bags from the animal shelter. And I think most people are pretty good about that. And I go very early in the morning. I see what the work they do. I know the cemetery probably as well as they do, the lots, where the lots are and everything. So I do keep my eye on those things. But I want to commend them for their hard work. And as I said, I was going to get the supervisor's name, and it just doesn't come to me right offhand. It seemed like, is it Bledsoe? Is that his name?
Is it Peppersack?
Pepper. Maybe that's it. Anyway, I want to commend him. While I'm here, I also want to compliment the animal shelter. Since I retired, I've seen a lot of things. I've gotten out more. And I see a lot of pictures and posters. They're putting those posters out to get those animals adopted, and I think they do a great job down there. I've been down to the shelter, and I think they're just doing a great job to get those animals adopted. Thank you very much for listening to my 5 minutes. Did I overspeak?
No,
Take
no.
too much time?
No, you got
Okay.
a couple more I'd give you.
Please relay my relay my comments to the cemetery staff.
Well, thank you very much for your insights, and your history there is interesting, and you're right, that's a segment of our staff that
You don't think about
yeah,
too
well,
much.
we certainly, they're
You
not
do,
as,
but-
as visible,
right.
and cemeteries, the maintenance on cemeteries are often taken for granted. It's only when they're not maintained that you really notice those things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.
Can I ask a question about that, Jason, about the cemetery? Does the city also maintain the Catholic cemetery, or is that the diocese maintain their part of the cemetery?
They take care of their own. We just maintain our cemetery.
Gypsum Hill, just Gypsum Hill?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There are no awards or proclamations today, so we will move on to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, public hearing on petition number 4328, requesting the vacation of a right-of-way in the Country Club Heights addition.
Dean?
Thank you for the one-week continuance. During that period of time, we were able to get additional feedback from affected utility providers and also from affected property owners, and you should have at your place up there an amended petition that's on a legal size form, and that petition, the owners across the street, Jason and Kathy Graves, agreed to join in the petition and are making it a joint petition requesting that the entire street be vacated south from its south terminus. And it's, I'm going to go here first, John, and then to the photo tour, but the petitioners here are Ronald Williams, who owns this house here that was built in 1970 by Judge Tickle and was always been oriented towards Sites Drive. And the other petitioners are Jason and Kathy Graves, who own this property here. Their holdings include down to here, and they also own this piece here, so they have both the south and the east frontage on what is today a paper street. And if you could go to maybe the photos, John. This is what it looks like at the intersection. Sites Drive is heading off to the southwest in this photo, and Eastboro Drive is going on to the south. This is Mr. Williams' residence right here. Again, this is the construction of the street heading south, where it terminates there with Mr. Williams on the west and the Graves is on the east. And again, we're just working our way south here. And again, this is the orientation of Mr. Williams' house to the street as constructed. And this is the Graves' house looking from the back of Mr. Williams' house. And they face and have access off of Eastboro Road, and the street ends right there. So the subject of this petition is this strip of right-of-way right here, which extends down to near this power pole. And the original platting of this street that occurred in stages, once in 1957 and the other in 1976, had a street that extended on down, and there was a plan for a cul-de-sac turnaround there, and that street remained unbuilt at all until 1995, and in 1995 it was constructed from the intersection of Sites Drive to this location. But the real crux of this vacation petition is whether the City Commission thinks whether it's likely that this street will ever be extended, or if it's desirable for it to be extended on down to this point. And so if you just look at the photograph and look at the curb line, look at the location construction of this inlet, the trees that have been planted here. This fence is actually located partially in the right-of-way on Mr. Williams's pool. Those are all kind of indications that it really, in 1995, wasn't seriously contemplated that the street would continue on, but that option was left open in 1995. So back in 1990, there was a similar petition filed, but it didn't have the support of the owners on the east side because the petition started at Sites Drive. Now this has been constructed this far. In 1995, there was a benefit district that assessed costs only to Lot 6 and 7, and they're both developed now with houses. Lot 8, which is the piece down in here, is got a creek and floodplain, doesn't have water service. It's not really deemed to be buildable. So you have a copy of the design in your packet. Maybe you could go to that, John. I don't know which slide it is, but it's the street design. But this was the design that the City Commission approved in 1995, and so the street started here at Sites in Eastboro. This was vacant, this was vacant, this was vacant, and this was considered to be buildable. The water line comes down and stops right here. The street comes down and stops right here, and you have Lot 8 here and a lot at the south end, Lot 9, that is occupied by a house, but that house is accessed from Estates Drive. So we've given you the background on that. At the time we wrote this report, the Graves were out of town on a family vacation and hadn't been able to give us their formal position, and when they got back they were indicated that they would like to join and see the street end where it does today. All of the utility providers, including Martha Tasker, were opposed to the vacation when first posed, but if that strip is retained as a utility and drainage easement, then Westar and the city utilities are protected. You just wouldn't have a street in there. So when we prepared this, we had a number of options for you to consider. One would be to approve the request subject to the area being retained as a utility and drainage easement. Option 2 there was with the consent and participation of the Graves. You could approve the vacation of the entire right-of-way basically from the south terminus here all the way down to where it would end. You could continue this public hearing if you'd like to request additional information or public participation, or you could deny the petitioner's request, which would mean that the existing conditions would prevail and it would leave the option of extending the street sometime in the future. But as we looked at, pieced together all the history and design and evidence, although the option was left open for the street to be continued, it just doesn't seem very practical on the one hand, and on the other hand, we don't know who would pay for it, because to pay for it, you'd have to want it, and everybody else has access. So if you could go back to that aerial photo, John, one more time, and I'll just... So we have Maynard Nelson, who's referred to in the report here. This is his house. He has a driveway here off of Estates. The Graveses have their access here off Eastboro. Mr. Williams has his access here. He owns a vacant lot that's a platted lot here that if it had a house on it someday could have access from Sites, and he owns this property right here on the other side of the creek, also accessible from Sites. So the only two parties that would get right-of-way returned have both signed the petition or are both in agreement. So that's the primary change, and the fact that the utility providers are not concerned as long as a utility easement is retained. And we do have sewer, water, storm sewer, and electricity all in that right-of-way there. The Graves did come in and sign their petition. They were not able to attend the meeting, but Mr. Williams is here if you have questions of him. But I think that's as thoroughly as we can cover it. I'd be open to any questions.
Questions, Mr. Andrew?
So is the request now that number 2, the request is asking that we approve the vacation of all of the right-of-way?
Yes, the amended petition that you have would basically, if you can see it on there, this is from this point here south, all of that's today right-of-way would be vacated and ownership would revert back to those owners, and they would have a common property line south of where the street ends. But yes, with the signature of the Graves, it would be alternative number 2. The ordinance that was drafted was based solely on Mr. Williams' participation, so if you choose option 2, then we would modify the ordinance to include the Graves' portion as well.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Okay, I'll bring this back to the commission.
Mayor, I move that we approve the vacation of the right-of-way of Eastboro South. It was existing, so that the east half of Eastboro would revert to the Graves and the west half would revert to Mr. Williams.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 10-10559 as outlined by Commissioner Larson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0. Moving on to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of July 12th, 2010. Item 6.2, acceptance of public sidewalk easement dedication on the south side of Magnolia Road on Lot 8, Block 1, Key Acres Addition.
Is there any item on the consent agenda that a commissioner would like to see taken off? Okay. If not, I'll accept a motion.
Move we accept the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0. There is no development business, so we'll move on to administration.
Item 8.1, second reading, ordinance number 10-10552, amending Chapter 8, Article 1, Division 1 of the Salina Code, adopting the 2006 International Building Code and local amendments.
Okay, this ordinance was passed on first reading on July 12th, and since that time, no comments have been received. I'll accept a motion.
Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number 10-10552 on second reading.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 10-10552 on second reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Arpke?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Mayor Peck?
Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
Item 8.2, second reading, ordinance number 10-10553, amending Chapter 8, Article 1, Division 2 of the Salina Code, adopting the 2006 International Residential Code and local amendments.
This ordinance was passed on first reading on July 12th, and since that time, no comments have been received. I'll bring this back to the commission.
Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number 10-10553 on second reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 10-10553 on second reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Arpke?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Mayor Peck?
Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
Item 8.3, second reading, ordinance number 10-10554, amending Chapter 8, Article 1, Division 3 of the Salina Code, adopting the 2006 Uniform Plumbing Code and local amendments.
This ordinance was passed on first reading on July 12th, and since that time, no comments have been received. I'll accept a motion.
Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number 10-10554 on second reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 10-10554 on second reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Arpke?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Mayor Peck?
Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
Item 8.4, second reading ordinance number 10-10555, amending Chapter 8, Article 1, Division 4 of the Salina Code, adopting the 2006 Uniform Mechanical Code and local amendments.
This ordinance was passed on first reading on July 12th, and since that time no comments have been received, I'll accept a motion.
Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number 10-10555 on second reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 10-10555 on second reading. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Arpke?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Mayor Peck?
Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
Item 8.5, second reading ordinance number 10-10556, amending Chapter 8, Article 1, Division 5 of the Salina Code, adopting the 2005 National Electrical Code and local amendments.
This ordinance was passed on first reading on July 12th, and since that time no comments have been received, I'll accept a motion.
Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number 10-10556 on second reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 10-10556 on second reading. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Arpke?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Mayor Peck?
Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
Item 8.6, second reading ordinance number 10-10558, amending Chapter 14, Article 3 of the Salina Code, adopting the 2006 International Fire Code and local amendments.
This ordinance was passed on first reading on July 12th, and since that time no comments have been received. I accept a motion.
Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number 10-10558 on second reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 10-10558 on second reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Arpke?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Mayor Peck?
Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
Item 8.7, resolution number 10-6751, amending resolution number 09-6653, authorizing and providing for the construction of improvements to certain existing public buildings in the city of Salina and providing for the payment of the cost thereof.
Mr. Franz.
Mayor and Commissioners, thank you. On August 24, 2009, the City Commission passed Resolution 096653, authorizing improvements at the Bicentennial Center in the amount of $2.5 million. Bonds were sold on May 1st, 2010 for those purposes as a part of Series 2010A. All of the improvements that we originally contemplated at that time have either been completed or now under contract. And the result is that we have some remaining funds due to the fact that we had favorable bids, and we also were able to use some of the energy audit funds that we had also provided for this to be integrated with this project. The original resolution authorizing the improvements was specific to interior improvements interior to the building. The proposed resolution expands that authorization to include exterior improvements, walls, roofs, and so on, as well as improvements to the grounds of the facility, parking lots and lighting, with the hope of taking the next most needed improvements and proceeding with those. Those are up for your consideration under a separate item. So I'd try to answer any questions you might have.
Questions, Mr. Franz?
Mr. Franz, I see under on the blue sheet here, it said these are bond proceeds we've already received, we just haven't spent yet. Can you explain what happens if we don't spend these proceeds in the next 18 months?
We are subject to Department of Treasury regulations regarding arbitrage, and if we don't spend the proceeds, then we have to start treating them as arbitrage bonds and reporting and submitting interest earned back to the Department of the Treasury. There's some risk they may become non-tax exempt, and we would want to avoid that eventuality.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Thank you.
Commissioners, just a quick note on this too. Obviously, this is to help address the item that's coming up. So not knowing where you want to go with that item, even if you didn't want to do that, this just gives you the flexibility to use the funds outside. So if you approve this and you didn't want to go with that, you still have flexibility later. It doesn't obligate you to anything.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring this back to the commission.
Mayor, I move that we pass resolution number 10-6751, amending the authorized uses for bond series 2010-A with respect to the Bicentennial Center, or as city manager mentioned, any other way is deemed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we pass resolution number 10-6751. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0.
Item 8.8, consider authorization of 3 improvement projects for the Bicentennial Center.
Mr. Perry.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm bringing before you today a series of 3 different projects, and we kind of addressed all of them in the blue sheet for you, but a couple of things I wanted to kind of be sure that is clear for you to understand is that when we were sitting down looking at what projects we wanted to try to do, as you know, the Bicentennial Center, if you touch one area, you impact another area. If you start doing something in one small project, you wind up touching a whole larger project. And what we looked at is things that would impact the facility, be of a assistance to the facility, fit the money that we have, as well as be able to make it to where it would be an improvement to the facility for the events and conventions and meetings that we have scheduled. Jack? Mr. Rolfe is helping us with our presentation at this time today. You have on the screen over here, and I'm sorry it's kind of such a large view of this, you do have in what we call the west parking lot, we are looking at doing a wiring replacement and pedestal installation in that area. We have numerous conventions that come to the Bicentennial Center where we have individuals who come that are bringing campers. The dog show, for example, which is the Wheatland Cluster Dog Show, which is made up of kennel clubs from not only Salina, Hutchinson, and Wichita, and we're seeking to try to get them locked in on a long-term basis with us. They practically fill up both parking lots with a great many campers and their dogs that they bring for the convention. The Kansas State Square Dancers Convention, which we have locked in for multiple years, bring a great many trailers and campers to the facility, and in fact this year we were not able to accommodate all the ones that did request electrical hookups because of the demand. The Tarzan Zerbini Circus, which comes, they get electrical usage from us and pay us a fee for that. We are the rain site location for the Smoky Hill River Festival, and many of the vendors that are over, the artists and the food vendors that are over in the Smoky Hill River Festival, as well as attendees, will park their campers in our parking lot. The See and Sell, which is presented by the Girl Scouts, they're another group that come to us every year, and we're very glad to have them, and their event brings many vendors who have trailers that have to park them out in our parking lot and require electrical hookups. The benefits to us having this wiring is that it would do it, the way we're currently doing it is, in my opinion, not the best way possible, where we're basically just rolling long extension cords across a parking lot, and it's making it to where, as we mentioned in the report, where one was damaged and it cost over $700 to replace it. A speeding car going through the parking lot just shot shot through the parking lot and destroyed the cord, so we had to go and replace it to be able to accommodate that convention. These pedestals are ones to where the wiring should last us 50 years or more. The pedestals are of a thermoplastic type to where we would be able to get the usage out of them under the normal wear and tear. And with the abbreviated usage that the Bicentennial Center does, they should last us for a much even longer time. We are looking to try to, we would be wanting to bring to you in a future report the raising of the current price that we charge for electrical at the Bicentennial Center to a higher dollar amount of $20 instead of $10. It would be done incrementally to work with the groups that are currently using us. We are not seeking to become an RV park in any way, shape, or form, but making this as a usable function for the groups that we have, as well as a product that we can market to future groups and conventions to have this available to them to when they could come and do their events with us. Would you like to move on to the next project, or do you want to take them one by one, Mayor or Commissioners?
Let's just keep going, and then we'll
Okay.
ask questions later.
All right, at the study session that we held with the commissioners a couple of weeks ago, we discussed the parking lot, and you can kind of see it in here. It's a little difficult to see, but you can see kind of some lines where there's some crack milling and crack resurfacing that was taken care of to try to fix in these parking lots. The fine folks over in Public Works and Utilities helped us to get a lot of these maps pulled together, as did the architectural offices from Jones Gillum, is that there's been nothing done to this parking lot from what we can tell since 2001. And it was noted in the study session as to just how bad a shape our parking lots are in. If we did the two projects where we did the electrical wiring and then the milling and resurfacing of the parking lot, we should get a good number of years out of the parking lot surface to where we wouldn't have to come back and do crack and fill for several years. Moving on into the next slide, you see these are our arena risers, as we talked about. I'm jumping slightly ahead because I got my slides in the wrong order. This is what they look like when they're pulled out, and that is the type of handrails that you see that are right in here that are not compliant with ADA. You know, a child could fall through those when they're on the end of a run of seats. They're not in the best of shape. These risers are over 31 years. They are the original ones given to that were put in when the building was constructed. Jack, if you'll jump to the next slide for me. That's what a set of them looks like. You can see that they sit unevenly. The bracketing underneath them is in very poor shape. We actually have enough risers to go in that goes in the east end of the arena. Those are permanently mounted, as are the ones in the north and west sides of the arena. These are the ones on the north side of the arena. They're permanently mounted. Now, the ones that are on the west end of the arena are portable ones, and they are over in storage, over in the storage building that we share with the Aquatic Center. We've had to rob parts off of those to be able to make these sets usable. The upfitting and the refurbishing that we wish to do on them is at a considerable savings as opposed to replacing the units. They have made a great deal of technological advancements in them since these were done, as far as being able to have a small motor that you attach to it to pull them out, as opposed to trying to do it with manual labor. If we do the refurbishing of this, it can prolong the life of these risers by about 10 years, as opposed to having to replace them at the cost of around $450,000 or more. We are estimating that the cost of doing this doing this type of work would be around $60,000 for the refurbishing of these risers. Those are the three projects that we wanted to bring to the commissioners, asking for your approval for us to go forward on the pulling together bids and specifications for each of these three projects.
Okay, thank you. Questions of Mr. Perry?
Excuse me, Mr. Perry, somewhere I read in here, and then I couldn't find it again, but did you say that there were 80 slots, electrical slots?
Yes, ma'am. There
Okay.
would be 80 locations to where 30 amp locations to where trailers campers could plug into
Okay,
in just that parking lot alone.
okay, and I guess I didn't understand what you meant by base bid, alternate 1 and alternate 2 on the
Okay.
very first.
Can you go back to the first slide?
wasn't quite-
Yes, ma'am. We've set this thing up to where there's a base bid, an alternate bid, and base bid, alternate 1, and alternate 2, and I'm sorry you can't see it completely on that slide. We've set this up in this manner to where it would all be bid, but they could bid it in the 3 segments. And if due to timing or scheduling of events that are going on, we would set it up to where they do like the base bid area, which would be this first area. And then we could, if we can't give them the availability of the entire parking lot, then a short period of time later, they could do the second segment that is over here, and then do the other segment.
Is the 106,000 for all of it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so obviously, if we divided it up into sections, it would be just a portion of that money that would be used at a time, or however that works.
That would be correct.
Also, if you're doing all the work to the parking lot, is one better to do at another time versus, you can't do it all at the same time, obviously. And when you were talking about the parking lot, were you even talking about that parking lot, or were you talking about the?
It is this parking lot, ma'am.
Okay, so we're not doing anything to the?
The other end, the east end.
side, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That is
all right.
correct.
It is just this parking lot?
That is correct, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So those two things are these two, it's just this parking lot?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Also, if I added the numbers up, it didn't come up to $406,000. So am I missing something?
No, ma'am. We've still got, there's still some funds that are left over, that some of that might be going towards, towards architectural fees, but it's not much. I believe the total of these three projects came up to $371,000.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And we had like around $35,578 left over.
Okay, so, but we would probably try to use all of that.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
in all of
Absolutely.
these. Okay.
And there again, that is a small enough amount that could be used to doing some other things inside the building.
How many of these electrical, what are we calling them, pedestals?
Pedestals.
Electrical pedestals, how many, are all of them working right now? Or
Well,
just
all of those are new. The way we do,
the ones that we have right now?
Oh.
Are they all operational, or do we have some that don't work at all?
everything that we have is operational, but what you have is you have a place where an electrical cord comes out, and
Right.
then there's a drop box. And then from that point is another cord that goes to another drop box.
That's what you were talking about, the extension
Yes, ma'am, where
cords.
we
Okay.
have basically just cables that are probably about the size of 3 fingers together, stretching, going across the parking lot, that are protected by boards to try to prevent them from being damaged.
And I've seen
But
that, yeah. And refresh my memory, how many of those do we have right now?
we can currently do in the parking lot, it's like 31 vehicles, 31 campers plugged in the parking lot at this time. Now, the reason why we're trying to go to this number is the other parking lot, if we're doing nothing in it at this point in time, between the two lots, we conceivably can do right at 70. But by being able to do 80, we should be able to meet our demand that we had during the Kansas Square Dancers. And last year, when we did the Wheatland Cluster Dog Show, we had 72 campers and trailers hooked up.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if when you redo the parking lot, it's basically going to be shaved down to that hard surface underneath, right?
That is my understanding, yes, sir. Maybe
Okay.
Mr. Frazier can chime in on that.
Okay. Now, if we're cutting areas out for conduit placement,
Okay.
you've got interruptions in that hard surface.
Well, actually, the concept that we are looking at doing, sir, is one that's called boring, where you actually go down and then over, where we're not looking at doing as much trenching.
Okay.
There may be a few additional holes, but it's not going into that hard surface like what you're referring to. It's a boring situation where it goes down and then goes horizontal.
Okay. Okay.
And we looked at, Ms. Tasker and her staff was very helpful to us in pulling together all the mapping and diagrams that shows that we should not be interfering with Westar utilities, any other utilities, piping, underground wires, anything of that nature.
And I can't imagine that this would be feasible, but concrete prices were looked at as well, or was that just completely out of the question, probably?
If we were looking at a total reconstruction, we might look at that. And I'm not sure for a parking lot if concrete would perform well. In this particular case, so I think it's been determined by engineering because of doing a mill and inlay that the base must be sufficient, and therefore this is a much lower cost option than a complete, I mean, I suppose we could look at a so-called white topping, which we tried on South 9th
Ninth
Street for
Street.
a traffic project, but it's not very typical you'd see that for a parking lot project.
Okay.
Not to say it wouldn't work, it's just usually it hasn't been used for that. So this is probably the most cost-effective approach given the life of the parking lot and the condition.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I just always hate that 6 to 7 year lifespan
Yes, sir.
issue. That
Yeah, and the base being good, when they mill that, we'll need to visually evaluate that base and see if there are any weak areas, and if there are, we'll need to make sure that we deal with those before the overlay comes into place. And what'll happen is I'll put the overlay, and the street's going to crack, an asphalt parking lot's going to crack. So there'll be a time in that life where there'll be cracking, and we need to do a very good job of keeping the cracks filled so that the water doesn't get in there and do the the freezing and the thawing and all that impact. So as long as we do a good job of that, we should get pretty good life out of it.
okay.
In prioritizing which maintenance projects were looked at, was it just a matter of seeing how many or how much we had left over in funds and matching that dollar amount with the maintenance projects that needed to be done so that you got as close as possible to using up the, okay.
Yes, ma'am. And also trying to look at is, like what the meetings and groups we have coming are, what they're looking for.
Okay.
Because we really want to try to lock that dog show in for multiple years.
Okay.
That's a big event for us.
Yeah, and Marshall mentioned the cost. This isn't a project where we're going to go out, as he mentioned, and say, well, this will just pay for itself. I mean, at $20 per stay, based on the current projections, it's about 20 years. And let's say that fee goes up some over time. So maybe it's between 15 and 20 years. So it gets, I don't know, fairly close over the life, but it probably won't get there. The key is it's a really nice complementary thing to offer for certain multi-day events, and that's where the biggest impact comes from.
Okay.
I do have one more question. We're going to work on this parking lot, and we talked about improving the lighting for the parking area. Is that extra money going to be able to be used for that if we find it?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I don't recall the amount of money that we had in the feasibility study, and I realized I did not bring a copy of it with me today. I will be glad to get that information and send it back to you as quickly as I can. I don't think it would do it on this one.
Okay.
But I'm quite certain that we can get that, programmed into the projects at some point.
I'm thinking we're running electrical wire anyway right now. It would be a good time while we've got the equipment there if we're going to have to upgrade the utilities.
I think
there.
it's a good thought, but I think it was considerably higher than this.
Yeah, we'll take a look. It's a very good thought.
Is there any further questions?
Well, I'm wondering if, as Commissioner Arpke said, if we want to wait on approving these, maybe it'd be wiser of us to hold off on the risers if we can use that little pool of money and get the lights done while we're tearing the parking lot up.
I don't think we're going to be able to touch anything for, we were looking at actually additional lighting sources completely, weren't we?
Right. What we were looking at was trying to do a more, I apologize. We have in each of these parking lots, we just have that one massive light pole light. What we were looking at doing was something that went in the various islands, Jeff, if I'm remembering correctly, and it's be considerably more than just that $35,480 that would be left over.
It'd be more than $95,000 is what
Yes,
you're saying,
ma'am.
because that would be the two amounts put
Yes,
together.
ma'am. It'd be way high dollar more than that, I'm afraid.
What we can do, Commissioners, we can go back and verify that, and on the presumption that's correct, it would take far more to get the lighting. I'll try to send you something by memorandum to let you know that if we find that it's close enough, we think we might want to take a shot on bidding, we could bring it back next week and have you look at modifying the project items.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring this back for the Commission's consideration. Would we just need to make a motion to approve the requested wiring, milling, arena furbishing? I mean,
That'd be
just do
fine,
that.
and then that gives us the authority to go out and solicit the bids.
Okay, then Mayor, I make a motion that we go ahead and approve the wiring and the parking lot improvements, but holding off on the arena riser refurbishing at this time. Is that correct?
If you go ahead and include the risers, what we'll do is we'll go back and check, and on the assumption that
Oh, then we amend that.
right, yeah. If we think there's enough money to address lighting, we'll bring it back to you next week, and you can
Okay,
change it
all
at
right,
that time.
so let me rephrase that, scratch that.
Save you an action item.
Rewind. Okay, Mayor, I move that we go ahead and consider the authorization of the 3 improvement projects for the Bicentennial Center, which is the wiring, the milling, and the riser refurbishing at this time, as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we,
Yeah, what she said.
I'm just trying to get rewind in my head. I don't think that's in Robert's rules. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the wiring replacement and pedestal installation, the milling and resurfacing of the west parking lot, and the arena riser refurbishing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0.
Mayor, I move to recess into executive session for 10 minutes to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege. for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matters, and for the purpose of discussing matters pertaining to non-elected city personnel, for the reason that public discussion of the matter would violate the privacy rights of the non-elected personnel involved, and reconvene at 4:55 p.m.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recess into executive session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0. Do you expect any action?
We do not.
Okay, we're in executive session.
Listen.
Greg said.